The rain didn't fall so much as it was smeared against the window pane by a listless, gray hand. Inside, the house was too quiet. A hollowed-out shell where the ghost of David's laughter still echoed in the corners, a cruel and fading echo. Helen stood at the sink, her hands submerged in water so hot it verged on painful, and watched the world weep. It was a fitting backdrop. Her son had been in the ground for 3 days. The silence in the house was a physical presence, thick and suffocating, broken only by the occasional creak of a floorboard upstairs, a sound that now felt like an intrusion rather than a comfort. Each room held a memory that was now a landmine. His favorite mug on the counter, the worn spot on the rug where he'd stand to tie his shoes, the faint, lingering scent of his aftershave in the hallway that made her heart clench with a fresh wave of agony every time she passed through. The envelope, thick and legal, felt like a brick in the pocket of her black cardigan. For my mother, Helen, to be opened alone upon my passing. David's handwriting, so familiar, so final. She'd found it taped to the back of his old engineering textbook, a place Chloe would never look, a hiding spot that spoke of a quiet, desperate secrecy. She'd opened it with trembling, age-spotted hands, the paper crackling like a dry bone in the stillness of her own silent kitchen, and the world had tilted on its axis. The words within were not just instructions, they were a confession of his deepest fears, a burden passed from a dying son to his aging mother, a final, heartbreaking act of trust. He'd left everything to her. The house with its familiar shingles and the porch swing he'd painted blue the summer Ethan was born. The 2 cars, his beloved vintage Mustang, which he'd spent years restoring in the garage, the smell of oil and gasoline still clinging to his old work jackets, and her sensible SUV, still smelling faintly of his coffee and his cologne. The bank account with its comforting cushion of life insurance, the policy he'd taken out when Ethan was born, always so responsible, always thinking ahead. All of it, to her. Not a word, not a single dollar for Chloe. The exclusion was absolute, a line drawn in the sand with the firm, unshakable hand of a man who knew he was running out of time, a will that was less a document and more a fortress built to protect what he loved most. His reasoning was laid out in cold, clinical, heartbreaking detail. I have come to believe, with a certainty that chills me, that Chloe's affections lie elsewhere. Her priorities are not with our family, not with Ethan. I've seen the distance in her eyes, heard the impatience in her voice when she thinks I'm not listening, noticed the new passwords on her phone, the business trips that never quite added up. I fear for our son's future if she has unfettered control. Mom, you must be his guardian, in every sense. You must protect him. Be the rock I know you are. Say nothing until the will is read. She cannot know. I trust you. I love you. The blow had been physical, a sucker punch to the soul that left her gasping for air at her own kitchen table, the world swimming in a blur of tears and disbelief. Her son, her beautiful, kind-hearted boy, carrying this secret, this corrosive fear, alone, dying with it, and now he had handed her the burden, the terrible knowledge, and the monumental task, trusting her with his most precious legacy. She had nodded to the empty room, her tears salting the dishwater, her voice a broken whisper that seemed to get lost in the overwhelming silence. I will, my boy. I promise. I won't let you down. I'll keep him safe. A door slammed upstairs, the sound jarring in the hushed morning, followed by the brisk, impatient click of heels on the hardwood. Chloe was moving, a whirlwind of activity that felt alien in the morning quiet house. Helen quickly dried her hands on a faded dish towel, arranging her face into a mask of placid grief, the concerned, helpful mother-in-law, the role she now had to play to perfection. The performance, a daily exercise in deception and self-preservation, had begun, each day a tightrope walk over a chasm of secrets and suspicion. The funeral was a study in dissonance, a spectacle that replayed behind Helen's eyes in flashes of aching color and sound, a memory seared into her mind. Helen, shrouded in a simple black dress she'd owned for decades, felt like a monument to a grief so profound it had become a new organ, heavy and vital inside her chest, a constant, aching weight. She held 7-year-old Ethan's small, bewildered hand, a tiny, warm anchor in a raging, cold sea of black suits and somber dresses, his small fingers clinging to hers as if she were the only solid thing left in a world that had suddenly stopped making sense. Chloe arrived late, making an entrance. She wore a sharply tailored black dress and blazer that was more corporate boardroom than burial, its severe lines a stark contrast to the soft, weeping shapes of the other mourners. Her sunglasses were oversized, hiding her eyes, but they couldn't hide the taut set of her jaw, the absence of a single tear tracking through her flawless makeup. She accepted condolences with a tight, perfunctory nod, her attention clearly elsewhere, her phone buzzing discreetly in her structured clutch with a frequency that felt obscene, a humming insect at a vigil, a constant reminder of a world outside this circle of grief. She had ignored Ethan, who clung to his grandmother's leg, confused by the somber adults and his mother's cold, distant presence. When the small, polished oak coffin was lowered, the sound of the first shovelful of earth hitting wood, the most terrible, final sound in the world, Ethan began to cry softly, a small, lost sound that tore at Helen's heart. Helen knelt instantly in the damp grass, the earth staining her knees, pulling him close, whispering soothing nothings, rocking him, trying to absorb his shock and pain into her own overwhelmed body. Chloe stood ramrod straight a few feet away, her head tilted as if listening to a distant, far more interesting conversation, her posture one of impatience, not grief. Later, at the house, surrounded by half-eaten casseroles and the murmur of muted conversations, Helen saw it. Chloe was in the corner, near the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf David had built with his own hands, his pride and joy. Her phone was pressed to her ear, her body turned away from the room, in a parody of privacy. Her free hand was gesturing, not in grief, but in sharp, slashing motions of impatience. Helen, mechanically refilling a water pitcher, her body moving on autopilot through the nightmare, caught a fragment, whispered but vehement into the receiver. A complete nightmare, I know, but just be patient. It's almost over, soon. Just a little longer. We just have to get through the formalities. The words coiled in Helen's gut, cold and serpentine. It's almost over? Formalities? His life, their marriage, his funeral, all reduced to an inconvenient interval to be endured? A bureaucratic hurdle? The coldness of it stole her breath. That night, after the last mourner had left, the suspicion hardened into a cold, flinty resolve. Chloe didn't cry. She didn't retreat to her room to grieve. Instead, she went through David's study, not with reverence or sorrow, but with the brisk, impersonal efficiency of an auditor, opening drawers, stacking files into neat piles, her movements quick and purposeful. She barely looked at Ethan, who tentatively approached her with his favorite dinosaur book, asking for a story before bed, seeking comfort. "Not tonight, baby. Mommy's tired and has a headache," she said, her voice flat and distant, her eyes never leaving the screen of her phone as she scrolled through messages, a world away from her grieving son. Helen had tucked him in, reading Where the Wild Things Are in a voice that only shook a little, doing her best impression of David's growly monster voices, her heart breaking a little more with every turned page. She kissed his forehead, breathing in his little boy smell of shampoo and innocence, a precious talisman against the rising tide of dread and anger. "I will protect you," she promised him silently, her heart aching, echoing the promise she had made to her father. No matter what, no matter the cost. The next day, she drove to the drugstore, the normalcy of the errand feeling surreal, and bought a small, spiral-bound notebook with a pale blue cover. It looked innocent, benign. On the first crisp, lined page, she wrote the date, in her careful, looping script.
And beneath it, she began to document the death of the woman she thought she knew, each entry a tiny incision into the facade, a chronicle of a betrayal in progress. Day 4, 10:15 a.m. Left Ethan with me. Said she had errands. No kiss goodbye for him, just a quick, absent-minded pat on the head. Didn't ask if he'd eaten breakfast. 3 p.m. Returned. Smelled faintly of cigar smoke. David hated cigars, said they were pretentious, and the smell was obnoxious. Ethan tried to show her a drawing he did of Daddy in heaven with a rocket ship. She glanced at it for half a second, said "That's nice, honey," and put it face down on the counter without looking at it again. He looked crushed. Day 6, 8 p.m. On the phone in the garden. I was taking the trash bins to the curb. Heard through the hedges. The life insurance is substantial, over $500,000. Of course I'll be free after. The old woman will be a problem, but we can handle her. She's not as frail as she looks, but she's no match for us. A few weeks, max. The words, "the old woman," spoken with such casual, venomous contempt, stole the air from Helen's lungs. We can handle it. A few weeks, max. She leaned against the cold, rough brick of the house, her heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. This was no longer just about money or a house. This was an explicit threat to her safety, to her very life, to her ability to protect Ethan. The game had suddenly become deadly serious. Her documentation became her obsession, her armor, her reason for getting out of bed each morning. She used her phone, taking surreptitious photos from behind curtains, Chloe leaving a sleek, modern downtown apartment building at 10 on a Tuesday morning, adjusting her clothes, a crumpled receipt for an expensive dinner for two, filet mignon, lobster tail, a bottle of premium champagne she'd fished out of the kitchen trash, a screenshot from Ethan's iPad of his mother's text log, a message to an unknown number saved as J. Can't wait to get out of this depressing mausoleum and finally start our real life. This purgatory is almost over. He's already got the tickets for Barbados. Each piece of evidence was another stone placed on the grave of the woman she thought she knew. The grieving widow was a meticulously maintained facade, and it was cracking at the edges, revealing the avaricious, calculating, and shockingly cruel stranger beneath. Helen felt like a detective in her own life, assembling a case against the person who shared her roof. The conflict simmered for weeks, a pot on the highest burner, vibrating, whistling, on the verge of a violent, catastrophic boil. The air in the house grew thicker, charged with unspoken accusations and simmering hostility. It finally overflowed on an unremarkable, overcast Tuesday evening. Helen was bathing Ethan, laughing with him as he made a fleet of soapy boats, trying to carve out a moment of pure, untainted joy and normalcy in the oppressive atmosphere. Chloe came home, her heels clicking on the hardwood with a sharp, angry rhythm that announced her mood before she even spoke, shattering the fragile peace.
"Helen, we need to talk. Now. It's important." Her tone was all cold business, devoid of any pretense of familial warmth, laced with an imperiousness that set Helen's teeth on edge. Helen's blood ran cold. She finished drying a giggling Ethan, helped him into his rocket ship pajamas, her movements slow and deliberate, buying precious seconds to compose herself, to lock her fear away in a deep, hidden place. "Go brush your teeth, sweetheart. Be sure to get the back ones. Grandma will be right there to check and read a story." She followed Chloe into the living room, the very room where David had died. Quietly. In his sleep, it felt like a profound violation to have this confrontation here, surrounded by his things, his photos, his memory, the very essence of the man they were arguing over. Chloe stood by the stone fireplace, not sitting, claiming the territory as her own, a general surveying a battlefield. "I've been going through the paperwork with the estate lawyer, the bank accounts, the mortgage, the titles. There seem to be complications, inconsistencies. Things aren't adding up." She crossed her arms, her gaze challenging. Helen said nothing. She just watched, her face a calm mask, her hands clasped tightly in front of her,
a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The lawyer was particularly evasive about the existence of a will, a new one. He mentioned something about a recent update, executed very quietly. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? David always told you everything. His little confidant. The last word was dipped in acid, meant to wound. The accusation hung in the air between them, toxic and heavy. Helen felt the solid weight of the notebook in her cardigan pocket, the cool, hard shape of her phone in the other. She felt the ghost of David in the room, a silent witness, willing her strength, feeding her resolve. David told me what he thought I needed to know, Helen said, her voice quiet but remarkably steady, belying the storm of fear and fury raging inside her. Chloe's mask of strained civility slipped entirely, a flash of raw, impatient anger. Don't you play dumb with me. This is my house, my money, my son's future. If there is some ridiculous, sentimental document, some last-minute manipulation, I need to know about it. I have a right, a legal and moral right. Your right? The words were out before Helen could stop them, laced with a frost she didn't even recognize in herself, a mother bear's growl. Your right to what, Chloe? To the life insurance policy you're so eager to collect and spend on a new life in Barbados? To the freedom you're already planning with, who is it exactly? The man from the apartment on Elm Street? Your dinner partner at the Oak Room? Jay? Chloe's face went pale, then flushed with a furious mottled red. How dare you? You've been spying on me, you vile, sneaking, pathetic old woman, going through my things. I've been observing my daughter-in-law. I've been watching a woman who didn't shed a single genuine tear for the magnificent, kind man who adored her. A woman who ignores her own grieving, confused son, who breaks his heart daily with her indifference. A woman who's on the phone planning her real life and her escape from this mausoleum before his husband is even cold in his grave. You didn't love him. You were just waiting for him to die. You bitter old witch, she spat, the veneer shattering completely, revealing the ugliness and rage beneath. She took a step forward, her hand clenching into a fist at her side. You always hated me. You thought no one was ever good enough for your precious David. You couldn't stand that he chose me. Well, he's gone, and you have no power here. This is my life. That is my son. You are nothing. Nothing but a lonely, interfering hag. It is David's son. Helen roared, the sound tearing from a place of primal, maternal pain she never knew she possessed, a lifetime of love and loss giving it force. And David saw you. He saw exactly what you are, a hollow, selfish, miserable gold digger who never deserved him. He knew everything. The air in the room crackled with pure, undiluted hatred. Chloe took another step forward, her eyes blazing with a terrifying, unhinged intensity. What did you say to me? What did you just say? Helen didn't flinch. She stood her ground. She reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out the notebook. She pulled out her phone. Her thumb, steady despite the tremor in her soul, found the photo gallery, the image she'd taken of the will for her own records. She turned the bright, damning screen toward Chloe. I said, he knew. Chloe's eyes, wide with fury, scanned the screen, devouring the words, her face a rapidly shifting canvas of emotion. The words, I, David Michael Walker, being of sound mind and body, hereby bequeath entirely to my mother, Helen Marie Walker. The color drained from her face, leaving a stark, terrified, paper white. Her arrogance, her anger, crumbled away in an instant, replaced by a frantic, cornered animal panic. Her future, the carefully laid plans, the tickets, the new life, all of it evaporated before her eyes, leaving only the ashes of her greed. This is a forgery, she shrieked, her voice rising to a hysterical, piercing pitch. She lunged for the phone, her fingers clawing the air, trying to snatch the truth away. "He wouldn't. He couldn't. You manipulated him. You twisted a sick man's mind against me. You poisoned him. You're a monster." Helen pulled the phone back, holding it tight, a shield against the onslaught. "The lawyer has the original. It's been authenticated by 2 experts and filed with the court. It's legal, Chloe. It's over. The house, the cars, the money, the investments, it's all mine. And I will use every single cent of it. I will use my last breath to ensure Ethan is loved and safe and raised to be the honest, decent, loving man his father was. You will not use a dime of David's money to fund your escape with your lover." The revelation was absolute. It wasn't a victory. It was a devastation. A nuclear option that left nothing untouched. A scorched earth policy that burned down any remaining pretense of family. Chloe stared, her chest heaving with ragged, shallow breaths. The reality of her utter defeat, a physical blow that seemed to shrink her. She was exposed, penniless, and outmaneuvered by the old woman she'd so carelessly dismissed. You can't do this," she whispered, a last desperate, pathetic plea, her voice cracking. "You can't. He's my son." "It's already done," Helen said, her voice exhausted, hollowed out by the seismic confrontation, all the fight momentarily drained out of her, leaving only a vast, weary certainty. "You can contest it. By all means, try. It will be long and ugly and expensive, and I will fight you with everything I have. I will show the court everything, the photos, the messages, the recordings I made, the evidence of you neglecting your son in his darkest hour. I will paint a picture of a woman so unfit, so consumed by her own avarice, that she forfeited any moral claim to anything. I will fight for him until my very last breath. David asked me to, and I will. I have nothing else left to do but keep my promise to my son." The fight left Chloe in a sudden, violent rush. She seemed to physically shrink, her shoulders slumping, her defiant posture collapsing, as if her bones had turned to liquid. She fell back into David's worn armchair, a marionette with its strings cut, utterly defeated and exposed under the unforgiving fluorescent light of the truth. A shell of the woman she'd pretended to be. Helen stood over her. Not in triumph, but in grim, weary finality, her body aching with a fatigue that went down to the marrow. The emotional confrontation was over. The truth, a terrible, damaging weapon, had been fired, and it had found its mark with devastating, irreversible accuracy. "You will leave this house," Helen said. The words not a request, but a quiet, ironclad decree, spoken with the full authority of a mother protecting her young. "You will leave tonight. You can take your personal belongings, your clothes, your toiletries, nothing else. You can see Ethan, under professional supervision, at a time and place I deem appropriate. But you will not have him. You will not have any of this. It was never yours to take. It was his, and now it is mine to hold in trust for his son." Chloe didn't look up. She didn't speak. She just sat there, slumped in the home that was no longer hers, surrounded by the ghost of a husband she had betrayed, utterly defeated by the quiet, fierce, unassuming mother-in-law she had so profoundly underestimated. Helen turned and walked away, her legs feeling weak and shaky beneath her, the adrenaline receding and leaving a profound tremor in its wake. In the hallway, just outside the living room door, Ethan was standing, his superhero toothbrush clutched in his small hand, his eyes wide with a fear and confusion no child should ever know, his little face pale. He'd heard everything, the shouting, the ugly, hateful words, the sound of his world breaking apart irrevocably. Helen's heart shattered anew. the pieces fracturing into a million smaller, sharper fragments. She knelt, the bones in her knees protesting, a sharp pain she barely registered, and pulled him into a fierce, desperate embrace, trying to shield him from the fallout of a war he didn't start, to absorb his terror into her own body. "It's okay, my love," she whispered into his soft hair, her own tears finally coming. A flood for David, for Ethan, for the innocence that was just lost, for the family that was gone, for the terrible weight of the promise she now had to keep alone. "It's okay. Shh, it's okay. Grandma's here. I'm always here. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to be okay. I promise. I will always, always be here for you." She held him, rocking gently back and forth in the quiet, broken house, the only sound his muffled sobs against her shoulder. It was a hollow, painful victory, paid for with a fortune of heartbreak and the utter destruction of any semblance of family. But she had kept her promise. She had protected her grandson. She had fulfilled her son's last desperate wish. The family was broken, but a piece of it, the most important piece, was safe. He was loved, he was cherished. And for now, in the overwhelming, echoing silence of the aftermath, that had to be enough. It was the foundation upon which they would have to rebuild everything. It was all she had left. It was everything.